about Russian flows of commodities. Well, those flows got turned off. They'll get turned back on through a multitude of sort of regulatory changes, approvals, physical attributes of the pipelines that need to be retested, and then obviously some of the sanctions that need to get wound back. And all of those things lend themselves to being difficult to then feed into a model when we're in the middle of a regime change and then adapt to that.
Mm. But presumably, since we've had Trump 1, your models are ready for Trump 2.
Yes, the machine learning models are working overtime on that. It's tomorrow it will be tariffs are on. Tomorrow they'll be 10%, 20%, 30%, and they'll be off again. So yes, that's the best use case for them.
You know, all of the big trading houses, or a lot of the big trading houses in this room, will say that they have the edge because they've got physical and that's a layer of data that maybe you guys don't have. What is your response to that?
There is some data that they do have that we don't have. And one of the important distinguishing features is there is a lot of data that we have that they don't have as well. And if you're sitting in the shoes of a physical trader, almost by definition, you see what you do in your own book, which for some of the largest physical traders in the world, they will see 10% of what actually occurs in the world. We may miss some of the small nuances, but what we're actually trying to do is observe and track what 100% of the flows and transactions and storage, et cetera, in the world will be doing. So we just go to a naturally more depth in terms of the amount of information we're bringing in. There are some pieces of information that we will miss, and what we effectively do is we adapt to, if that means we lose some skill in what we're doing, we won't take trades or bet against those points when someone else has an informational advantage against us. But I think overall it is really a magnitude game of how much information you can bring in. There would be probably no one else in the world who brings in as much information from a data standpoint into their business as what we do. We know how to capture it, we know how to clean it, we know how to use it, we know when to apply some of these models to that, and when we also know and understand when to use the sort of pure fundamental and physical approach to it.
Okay. I'm sure that you're spending a lot of money on AI. How do you measure the impact of that? How do you judge success of that spend?
Well, we always measure it in two ways. One is what is our skill in forecasting? So we try and measure that both in terms of the importance of the forecasts that we will have, and then often you'll end up becoming a little wedded to the fact that these models are improving your skill, but sometimes not in the most important facets of what we do. So I think it's always important for us to sort of distinguish between I can have a model that forecasts something pretty simple in the world, and I can improve that by 5%. But that 5% is pretty irrelevant to us in terms of the overall trading success of what we'll do. Having an improvement on the skill of where there's a regime change that is occurring, so power markets when you start installing more batteries, more renewables, and having different constraints on the grid, they're the sorts of things that the market has not yet seen before. Having an understanding of how the actual grid and response will work to those changes that the market has not yet seen before, they're often some of the best trading opportunities. So I think we try and distinguish between not just throwing models or statistical models at all of these approaches, because there is a difference between the value, the cost you put into building those versus the actual output. And for some of them, they're important. I think weather is probably one of the interesting ones. But many of these others are either actually sometimes even misleading, but even not particularly important in terms of the magnitude of what they can bring to us in terms of the forecasting approach.
Are there some markets that are easier than others to apply the technology?
Yes, I mean there's a sort of a simple adage of be careful of overfitting almost any model in which you have. So if you've got just an abundance of information and data in a very stable market, so take it back 5, maybe 7 years, some of the gas markets in the US would have been pretty well suited for this because you had an abundance of data. There was a lack of structural change. LNG wasn't driving the US gas markets. That was a pretty good use for some of the statistical models that you would have. As soon as you get into the world of sparse data, agriculture and some of the other markets like that, or different transit flows that are occurring, and definitionally when you're getting into the markets that are going through regime change, then we're always very careful in which to apply that to.
So then just coming back to my initial question about democratization of technology, how do you see the development of AI really impacting the competition amongst traders going forward?
Yeah, I think I think if we start from just the first point, if we look across this room today versus 5 years ago, the numbers of people here who have a data, a technology, and even an AI background to what they're doing, or even what their entire business model is built upon, is completely different to what it would have been 5 years ago. The question is, what does it look like in another 5 years from here? How much of it is still the physical trade, and how much of it is dominated by the presence of those groups versus versus those who have more of a pure technology bent to their business? I would say there are two things about that sort of the evolution of the commodity industry. One is almost everybody has to start using or is using technology more, and AI even, in terms of just pure efficiency gains. What that ends up meaning is that the barriers to entry starts dropping, which means that the numbers of participants in the industry can start increasing. We're already starting to see that. There are more participants coming into the commodity trading industry in the last few years. Just the natural time to build a business and the ability to scale that very quickly has come to the forefront. Then I look at the two different business styles. We'll just simplify it as the physical businesses and the financial businesses. The physical businesses, interestingly, are hiring more data scientists than probably anyone in the entire financial industry. So that's an interesting point to raise, for the simple reason that, is there a strategy behind what they're doing, or are they doing it because they're playing defense? And if you're playing it because you're playing defense of, we need to do something here to justify the fact that we have this data and we need to respond to the fact that everybody else seems to be doing it, so I'll follow what the financial industry is doing. The really important point for me is that if you're sitting in that seat, then you need to have the leadership, the vision, the strategy, and how to understand how to build an entire ecosystem of technology to support all of that. Otherwise, you're going to build something to the side that's probably not going to get used by most of your traders. That might be one to watch. Go to the other side, the financial traders. They're just obsessed with, they have the technical capabilities to build all of these forecasting approaches and models. What they lack is some of the fundamental and physical understanding, and even more importantly, they just lack the data. Being in the industry for 20 years like we have a history of data across every single market for 20 years. If you're new to the business, you're trying to scour all the information you possibly can. Some of it is literally scraping information that may not be available to you today as it would have been if you had have scraped it and kept it over that 20-year history. So you can see the obsession with anybody who's sitting in the more financial world is looking to try and get into the compete by getting more data, and then the physical teams are trying to approach it by just becoming more of the data scientists. So how that converges is more efficiency, more players in the market. We'll end up having what we think of as more crowding in the market. So crowding is sort of more of an equities type term, where that brings with it some extra volatility. It can actually bring with it volatility that's not great, because it ends up having large position volatility around either data reports or unwinds of positions. But ultimately, there will be, like in any industry in the world, there will be 4 to 5 leaders in this industry in commodities trading, of which we will be one. And it's a winner takes all. Like, you look across the industry today, there's always still the dominant players. The ones who understand how to bring those two attributes together will be the ones who will lead over time. In its current form, we'll just have more people participating to try and access those returns.
Okay, just one quick last question. So if the physical guys are spending a lot on building their data operations, and the financial guys are trying to get their hands on data and understand the physical operations, where are you placing your resources?
We always, and have never changed our view, which is we have to have a series of people who work for us who have traded physically. They have that fundamental understanding and information. They have domain expertise. They have scheduled gas on pipelines. They have operated vessels. And then we match and marry them with people with domain expertise, being meteorologists, transmission experts. We do have data scientists. We do have engineers who build the ecosystem with us and for me. So it is that all-encompassing model that brings it together that is extraordinarily fundamental, but also using the available information to make ourselves as accurate and as skillful as we can.
Seb Barrack, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm, and thank you, Seb. I'll be back tomorrow after lunch with an AI panel, a panel devoted just to AI in commodities, so don't miss that if you're interested in getting even deeper into this particular fast-moving topic. Our next panel is going to go further into the geopolitical landscape. As we heard in the first panel, geopolitics is now the driver of so much in this industry and has been for some years. But we're specifically going to focus on the US and its evolving role on the world stage with the return of Donald Trump to the presidency, shifts in diplomatic relations, trade policies, everything that impacts the commodities sector. For this kind of panel, you have to check your phone seconds before going on stage to make sure nothing has happened that's going to change the conversation. But no one really knows what will happen next. So we're reliant on some great insights. We're going to welcome to the stage, moderating the panel, Jamie Smith, our US industry and energy editor, together with Gideon Rachman, our chief foreign affairs commentator, Karen von Hippel, former US State Department and Royal United Service